Oh, Sonic. What'd you think of Sonic?
I enjoyed it. I think we both liked Sonic. Okay, she's giving me the like, it was, I appreciated that. I thought that there wasn't a whole lot that they just relied on. Oh, look at that mannerism from the game. Look at that reference point in a background from the game. Look at what
Right.
it was. Just, I mean, you had to know like the basic idea of what he is, where he came from. He's a video game character. He's
Yeah.
not from our dimension, and if you can just buy that, and now you have a funny buddy comedy kind of thing, then okay.
And peak Jim Carrey. Do not forget peak Jim Carrey.
You were on point with that very much. Like I actually would have. I found myself wanting him to go further.
A little bit. Yeah.
Like it was yeah, it was good, and I'm like, oh come on, Jim, you're at like a 6. You're like a you're like not you're like a Jim, not even a Jim Carrey 6. You're like a regular kind of goofy-ish comedian, physical comedian, maybe like 4. I want a Jim Carrey 8. Come on.
I mean, I'm hoping in the sequel because he goes nuts at the end of that movie. So
Mm-hmm.
that's got to be like he's just saving it for the sequel. Hello and welcome to another episode of Bry Guy and his Super Friends. I'm your host, Brian Labick. Joining me for this episode as a guest, still has no name, Josh Zorch.
I am the Bumble to your bee, Brian.
I was going to try to bring it back around, so I'm glad you still use that.
I didn't know if we'd get there, so I partially stole it, but was hoping like, well, I would hate for it to go to waste.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we're still kind of hunting for a nickname for you. So we'll try to get creative every week if we can.
I like it.
See what we come up with. All right, so we're just the two of us. We're flying a little bit solo, or the duo. We got the duo here we're doing another Never Seen That. We got that lined up. So if you are unfamiliar with this, I guess, theme of episodes, basically we just kind of find a movie that someone hasn't seen, something that at least one of us tries to deem something they should have seen, and we usually start by talking about what they know going in. We'll take a break to watch the movie, and then we'll talk about their thoughts after the movie. So for this one, I guess I see it less as an essential movie and more of just trying to redeem a franchise for Josh.
That's fair.
If you've listened to the show before, you've heard Josh's distaste for the Transformers franchise. And this is again at Josh's suggestion. We're going to watch Bumblebee.
Just like our notes from a few weeks ago, when we picked up the Fast and Furious movies again, this is what quarantine is doing to me. I think my paraphrasing my message to Brian the other day was, I crave socialization. I will even watch Bumblebee.
Yeah, something along the lines of social interaction or something like that. Yeah.
Yes.
All right, so sort of kicking us off, and just to sort of refresh, I guess, for people listening that haven't heard you rant about Transformers before, but I guess what is it sort of about the franchise that has turned you off from it?
Well, I will say I saw the first Transformers in theaters, and I don't know. Since then, that was 2007, so I've probably seen it 3 or 4 times. It started an aspect in that movie carried through to the next 2 that I eventually saw at some point over the next years that just drove me bonkers, which overwhelmingly is anytime something moves in those movies, you can't tell what is moving. You unless a whole thing is moving without changing one aspect of itself, you can't, your eyes just can't translate that to your brain.
Yeah.
The first one, I honestly, I taking that specific detail away from the first one, I still don't think the first one is that bad of a movie. I think it's actually pretty entertaining.
Yeah, I think that sort of story holds up. A kid in his car type of story.
Yeah, and you get, a lot of the humor of him being a teenager and interacting with his parents and, interacting with the girl and all that.
Yeah, yeah.
And then, okay, you throw in like the sci-fi threat and the space threat and all the lore to it. And okay, that's cool. That's fine. I did not see either of the next two in theaters. I forget how I eventually saw the second. Was the second one Dark of the Moon?
Second one was
Or was that
Revenge of the Fallen.
Revenge. Okay. Whatever point I saw that, because I think that was two years later. So I know I didn't see it when it came out. It was probably a year or two after it came out. And by the point, like 15 minutes into the movie, where Shia's mom is running around campus on move-in day, high off edibles, for no reason, and even what she does, and like it just, I was out. Like I finished the movie, but like there was nothing about it that is the only thing I remember.
Yeah.
That literally, I don't know if I could tell you another detail. I think that's also, is that also the one that Megan Fox, that was the first one she was not in, or I don't even remember.
She was in the first two. She did not come back for 3.
I did not even remember that part.
Yeah.
So at that point, I didn't really have much of an interest in them anymore. So then, like, another 2 years goes by, and number 3 comes out. I didn't see that for, I want to say 3 or 4 years afterward. The only reason I ever watched it once was because we hosted a movie in the backyard night at our old house, and we bought the Riff Tracks version.
So wait, I don't know if I remember that. Like, I remember having that viewing.
Mm-hmm.
I think I assumed you had seen the movie at least once before that, and then got the Riff Tracks just as an excuse to more or less have a reason to sit down and watch it, I guess. Just a way to make it tolerable.
Gotcha. Yeah.
I don't think I knew that was the first time you'd seen the movie.
Yeah. And that was the first and only. And then, and again, like another 2 years goes by or whatever, however long it took. And for no explicable reason in the trailers, there was, to someone who really wasn't paying attention very much, it did not seem like a continuing storyline was obviously apparent between 3 and 4 and 4 and 5. Like, I could not just follow a thread by watching general previews. So there's nothing about it that really wanted to hook me in. And then was it number 4 is the first time that Wahlberg shows up.
Yeah.
And then they're like, oh yeah, there was actually robot dinosaurs. I'm like, no, there wasn't. There's no way this is happening. So I was well out by 4. 5, I think 5 came out, might have been when we were working at the theater. I don't remember what year that was.
It's within the last couple of years, 3 or 4 years, I think.
If it was 2017, we were there. I forget what year that was. But then Bumblebee was happening, and I knew, like, all right, I don't have any interest. I was actually kind of bummed that Haley Steinfeld agreed to do it. But then you guys came back. I think, I think probably like you and Eric or Romano, and said, hey, you know what? That actually wasn't that bad. And you've been defending it ever since then. So about a year and a half, you've been saying, look, I know we have given our money to those other chapters, but legitimately this one's not that bad.
Unlike you, I have seen all of the Transformers movies in theaters.
How do you feel about that?
I know what I'm going in for. I still pay the money. I remember liking the first, like the trilogy when it came out. I don't think I realized until like repeat viewings that I just get bored with them.
Oh, okay.
I'm with you. I think the first one can hold up on its own. I think it's a good movie. The other two after that just get so bloated with Michael Bayness that it's easy to lose track of what the hell's going on and why. And I also think you picked it up just peripherally from watching trailers, but there's a very loose continuity between the movies, and each one seems to retcon the other.
Okay.
Of certain things that tie to some sort of origin to the Transformers and Cybertron and their homeworld and stuff like that. It seems like the stories change every movie.
Okay.
And I don't think this one's any different. I still think it retcons some stuff and changes the continuity again. So again, loosely fits inside of what has happened, but Bumblebee is a lot more dialed down than what the big bombastic Transformers movies have been up until now, which I think helps the movie.
Did Bay do all of the first 5?
Yes.
I know he did the first 3. Did he did all of them? Okay. Until this, he did not do Bumblebee.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up. Yeah, this one is directed by Travis Knight. The only other director credit to Travis Knight prior to this was Kubo and the Two Strings.
Really?
Yes.
Which
is a fantastic movie.
Yeah, admittedly, still haven't seen that, but I've never heard anything but praises for that.
Yes. Yeah.
And the styles, I mean, that's like as I understand it, like that's a...
It's animated in some high, but it almost looks like stop motion.
Interesting. And I mean, as far as I can tell, I mean, like the cultural foundation from where that seems to come and whatnot, like that just seems like a very drastic stylistic jump,
right?
From taking on a project like that to, oh yeah, we're gonna do a Transformers spinoff.
And I think that just came from someone eventually listened that we don't need a big bombastic, we can't tell what the hell's going on Transformers movie, and let's settle it down and try to get to know these Transformers and bring some heart back to these movies. And I think this movie succeeds in that. So it was a good definitely a good change of pace from what we had seen prior to this.
And if it still happens, I didn't realize a $6 billion man movie.
I did see that when I was looking at IMDb.
Yeah, has been, I think, like in development hell for years and years, but I guess he's the most current person attached to.
And I'm pretty sure I heard Travis Knight's name tossed around in the Uncharted director roundtable.
Oh, okay.
For that video game to movie that I've been waiting for forever. I'm pretty sure he was attached to this at some point. He is no longer, but I was excited for him to come into that movie had it happened.
That's a bummer. So that wasn't just like, a name that got tossed around for consideration. As you understood it, he actually might have been in potential serious talks. And
I think he was attached for a while, but it just keeps getting stuck in development hell and delayed. That every time they attach a director, the director leaves. There's been 6 or 7 directors attached to this movie.
Well,
to Uncharted.
I mean, they don't want to let the Flash have the title forever.
Yeah. So yeah, it's just been. That's a whole nother podcast going through all those directors, which I know I've talked about other times before. So just sort of going into Bumblebee. Do you know anything about Bumblebee going in? Where it might fall in the Transformers timeline, anything like that?
No.
Okay.
All that, I mean, when I heard like that they were going to do a spinoff and a standalone centered on that one, I'm like, all right, so that's Shia's car from the first couple.
Yeah.
I don't know how you're going to make an entire story, assumingly predominantly around one of them. I mean, I kind of... Maybe on paper, it kind of makes sense to do something just about Optimus Prime, or something about who's the leader of the Decepticons?
Megatron.
Because you could definitely have like a villain-led central movie or something, but just like this like ancillary character who, I mean, I consider him ancillary as far as he was presented in the movies,
right?
But no, I don't really know where if this is supposed to ignore a bunch of the other chapters and it's like completely on its own timeline. If it's, I'm assuming that if I had to take a guess, it presumes that the first Transformers happened, and that the world. This is not the first time someone will have seen a Transformer.
Okay.
And that potentially it's now already like one of those things of like, yeah, we knew that happened, but those haven't been seen for, 15 years, or people don't really need to worry about them anymore, etc. And now she stumbles across this one. I mean, I'm assuming something like that, but I'm guessing this is not carrying out of like, oh yeah, Bumblebee was a part of those first 5 chapters, and this is just the next piece of his story. Like it probably diverges somewhere would be my guess.
Right. Okay. Well, I think it's about time we take a break, we watch a movie, and we'll come back and talk about how much you were right or wrong in your presumptions.
All right, we'll see. Hopefully, this is not just masochistic to myself because of social isolation, and there's something that I actually enjoy about this. So fingers crossed.
Yeah, hopefully Josh hasn't pecked his eyeballs out by the end of this movie. All right, we'll take a break. We will talk to you when we come back. All right, so we are back from concluding Bumblebee. And just before we get into our discussion, I'm going to throw out the spoiler warning just in case. It gives us free reign to talk about whatever we want after watching the movie. And just in case you haven't seen it yet and don't want spoiled, you can pause this now, come back after you've caught up to us, watch the movie, because there will be spoilers to follow.
Spoiler! Spoiler! Something like that.
All right, so we are back, and we'll just kind of dive in.
Yeah, let's do it.
Now that we've finished, Josh, what did you think? As bad or what? I guess we didn't really see. I guess it's safe to assume you assumed this would be better than the other Transformers movies. So did it meet, fall below, exceed expectations?
Exceeded expectations, and yes, I would say much more enjoyable than at least Transformers 2 and 3 that I saw.
Okay.
Probably on par with the first one, like my memories of the first one.
I mean, there's a lot of similarities between this and the first one.
Very much.
They're both, kid in their car or almost like kid in their dog type of story.
And very well done with the humor and whatnot. I would say, yes, pleasantly surprised.
Okay. Well, that's good. Now I don't feel like it was pulling teeth to get you to sit down and watch a movie, so that's good.
No, and I mean, on the one hand, I don't think I necessarily regret not seeing it before.
Yeah.
But and I don't know if I would, like, if they continue sequels or they continue this storyline. I can't say I would like jump out of my seat excited or like definitely make it to the theater for it, but expectations have been adjusted.
That's what I was trying to do a little bit of research before we started to see what was the latest, because I thought I heard they were trying to make a sequel to this, but I also thought I remembered them talking about other Transformers proper movies, so I don't know what the hell's going on, but the last thing I saw, I think, was that they hired two different writers, one to write a Transformers sequel and one to write a Bumblebee sequel, and as of yet, they haven't moved forward on either, I don't think.
Well, maybe let's use this as our reference point to start to dissect. So this, I guess I should have guessed, because this would have been the easiest way to do this. I did not realize this was to be a prequel to all the other stories. It picked up on that in the first, couple of scenes, and then it just becomes blatantly obvious that's what it is. It's, happening in at least like the mid to late 80s. So I guess given that, you could actually still do both, because there's a lot of time in between. It's about a 20-year time period. If you're assuming that the first movie takes place in 2007, the year it was released in real life, then you got about a 20-year time period to play with. But I mean, to your point that you made before in the pre-discussion, is it's if they just continually retcon what the previous movies were in order to serve the purpose that they want the current movie to play, then how much could they really do with additional prequels that just completely erases everything that is supposed to be in one solid continuity.
Right. And for the most part, this kind of leaves off where it should. The only exception is that, like, Bumblebee is there talking to Optimus on Earth, and then you see multiple other objects falling from the sky, which you are assuming could be other Transformers coming to the planet. But if you watch Transformers 1, it's like they're getting there for the first time. So that doesn't make sense to me.
Oh, no, not at all. The one thing I definitely don't remember, it's easily been 7, 8, 9, 10 years since I watched the first Transformers again.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you recall where Bumblebee starts in that story? Shia LaBeouf obviously comes across him and discovers him in some way. I don't even remember really how that is. If it's like a similar way where he basically gets like a junker car. I don't
Yes.
remember if he gets it from a relative or same thing. He gets it from like a crappy auto dealer or a junkyard. Is the idea that Bumblebee is already there and has been there for quite a while?
Yeah, so the whole thing with that story was that the Shia LaBeouf's like grandfather or great grandfather has like some sort of code or coordinates on his glasses that someone figures
Right.
out they need to get. So it's almost like the Decepticons and the Autobots are trying to find said MacGuffin. And I think Bumblebee
Okay.
must track him down, so he is on a birthday being taken to a car lot to pick out a car. And that's when Bumblebee kind of makes himself available to Shia.
But it's not okay, so it's not explicitly disclosed though that like you've been here a long time already.
I mean, he's that same Camaro that he is at the end of the movie, just beat up and
Okay.
ragged looking. And they're at a used car crappy lot.
All right. So walk me back one more step. So I forgot about the glasses. So now I kind of remember that. So don't they give some backstory about like Shia LaBeouf's grandfather was like some like Arctic researcher or
Yeah.
some kind of thing in the
So he stumbled
40s or
across
whatever.
I think he stumbled across Megatron.
Yeah.
So the Decepticons are looking for Megatron, which the coordinates for the glasses lead them to Megatron.
Okay.
So I don't know
So-
if maybe Bumblebee is there. I'm trying to remember now too. Bumblebee might have been there to try to protect Shia from the Decepticons trying to get the coordinates. So he was sent to him sort of more like a protector, and he just made himself a car there because he was
Uh-huh.
looking for a car.
Okay. So all right, so it loosely might be able to line up if you aren't even the least bit strict.
Right, but it's definitely like every other Transformer other than Bumblebee shows up in that movie and then makes it a point to scan a new object and become said car. But in this movie, they're already cars and they're already here apparently. So where the fuck did they go after that?
I as we're about halfway through Bumblebee and I realized I mean I was never even in like reruns or anything as a small kid. I was never hooked into the Transformers IP. Just the, I don't know if
Eric
like,
and Romano are just weeping right now.
I know. It's just like I don't know. It wasn't like a part of our household. Nobody like my older brother wasn't like a big fan. Like it just I wasn't given the exposure, and no one really cared about it. So
Yeah.
it just wasn't a thing for us. I mean, we were kind of like the right age. It just wasn't when it hit us. So as I'm watching this, it occurred to me that I part of me wants to say this would have been a really good introductory movie
Oh, for sure.
for the Transformers.
Yeah.
But I think if you knew that the Transformers were this much bigger thing, this would have seemed so empty and so narrowly focused that you're like, well, wait, where's this huge, massive universe of things that I know about? So
Well, I think
don't
that's why they open
think
the
it would have
movie the way
played
they
well.
do.
Sure.
Like you are on the Battle of Cybertron at the beginning of the opening of the movie to sort of set the stage for what this could be.
Yeah, I think like real fans would not have been very happy with this if this was the first Transformers movie to this scale in the modern era that was ever made.
Yeah.
And so to that extent, like finding a middle ground between those 2 points, I almost thought if this had nothing to do with Transformers, and I don't know, maybe like Transformers movies were never made, I don't know. If there's some kind of like alternate history where someone just had this idea of like some kind of like alien cars, alien tech, life forms, it almost plays well for me. It played well not thinking about it as part of a bigger thing.
Yeah. I could see that. I mean, I think one of the things they run into too is for Transformers movies, and I feel like people go into it wanting to see the Transformers. I don't feel like people give two shits about the human characters. I mean, they do a good job of making you care for them like, I think the first Transformers movie did a better job. This movie does a very good job of caring for the human characters, but if you want those action-packed Transformers movies, I feel like they're better off if you don't have human characters in it, but those are expensive movies that I don't think anyone's going to want to make.
Do you know, like, are you deep enough into the older, like, Transformers lore and series and whatnot to know, like, do the majority of those stories take place on Earth? Is that where that is all happening?
Yeah, I'm not as deep as like Eric and Romano. The only thing I kind of know about this one is that they rolled back some of the designs for the characters. Like Optimus is like his older, like 80s animated series Optimus design instead of the reformed, revamped Optimus that Michael Bay made for the movie.
Mm-hmm.
So they went back to some of the 80s characters' designs for this movie, which I think, Transformers fans enjoyed and picked out and liked the references there, and was more classic Transformers, I guess, for them, as opposed to making everything stylized and with flames on the side like Optimus was in the first Transformers movie.
Huh. So that's interesting. Let me jump off on there for a moment, because whatever that choice was, like, for whatever reason, one thing I was definitely going to call out in this is that the CGI is not anywhere near as jarring and overwhelming to the eyes
Yes.
as those other ones are.
And I don't know if it's just the tech or like the artistic choice. That's where I guess, because this is
Right.
10 years longer, like 10 years later than what that first movie was. And that could just be a limitation
True.
of the tech at the time.
True. And I remember hearing something around the release of the first movie that they had, I heard that they had engineers basically work out how, if you started with vehicle X, like real life vehicle X,
Yeah.
or, helicopter, truck, whatever you're working with, mechanically, what would the transformation look like?
Yes.
How do you take where you're starting? How would things move to end up where they are, and
Right.
how would that look? So if they figured out how to do that just from like a mathematical standpoint and a mechanical engineering standpoint, that is pretty cool. But the look of it was like, most of what was great about Bumblebee, and they actually did a better job with the other two antagonists, I think too, they hid a lot of the machinery. Like the design of Bumblebee, you mainly just see, the yellow bodywork,
Right.
if you want to call it that.
Yeah.
Like, you just see that body part, that flesh, if you will, that exoskeleton. So you're not constantly distracted by all these little moving pieces that make up all the components that are supposed to be something.
It's one of those
And
things.
to the eyes, that felt like that was a lot better.
It's one of those things, like, just because you can do something, it's not sure if you should do something.
Mm-hmm.
So I understand, like, you guys took the time to figure all that stuff out, but does it need to be shown? Like, is that something that Transformers fans are like, well, I gotta figure out where the engine goes in this part because that's important to me? Or do you just want the thing to look cool?
Yeah, and I will cut them a little slack to say that if there's a chance, knowing human beings, that especially if they had established with the first movie that they just created a series of CGI movements, and all of a sudden you had a tractor trailer, and now you have Optimus Prime.
Yeah.
The people would have said, well, that was lazy with the the money and technology we have. You could have figured out a way to sell that and as reality more, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
So maybe it was a rock and a hard place at the beginning, but maybe a different choice they could have made earlier on, or even gone in movie 2 or 3 perhaps, like establish one time, the first time there's a big transformation, show some like cool in-depth thing for 30 to 45 seconds where you are showing me one of them
Yeah.
go through all these movements so that I understand that you figured that out, but you don't have to do it every single time.
Right. Yeah.
And that when I'm looking at the final product, I can actually tell what the hell I'm looking at, as opposed to just a jumble of chrome and metal.
Coming back around to like what the hell you're looking at, what do you think of the director change? Did you notice a difference between this and Michael Bay?
Oh, very much.
Okay.
very much. I mean, it was like night and day with how much it was reined in.
What about the fight sequences?
Um,
At least from
maybe,
what you
again, it's
can
been
remember from past
from
Transformers movies.
Yeah, probably a little bit toned down, but that also might be playing into the bias I've now developed with, since it's easier to see what is actually happening, and I can register that. If I'm watching Transformers 2, I'm preoccupied with how frustrated I am of the ridiculousness of what I cannot see.
Right.
That is playing into my opinion of how unnecessarily complex it was, or how over the top I might think it is. So there might be a bias built into that.
Well, I think that's a fair point. Is like some of those action sequences, especially for the earlier ones, they might have got a little bit better for some of the later Transformers movies, but honestly, they all kind of blur together for me.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember like the first one especially. I could tell cool stuff was happening, but the camera was not settling down enough to tell what was happening, and the Transformers were so big in the frame that sometimes they were cutting off of the frame. You couldn't. It was like too close up. You couldn't tell what was happening. This movie,
is a good point.
Bumblebee, I think they did a very good job, and maybe this is just. I don't know if this is Knight's approach, like Travis Knight, the director's approach, or if they learned from the other movies to not do that kind of thing. But the camera settles down, it pulls back, it lets you see like longer shots, not just like cutting quickly for action purposes, but just letting the camera roll and have the fight sequence happen in frame, which is a lot easier to follow, and I think pays off a lot more.
Yeah, I agree. That I hadn't realized that was part of what was so jarring about those first few of the series, that if you have an object that is so large in scale to what what a human being considers to be large, and then you have a lot of like these close-up frame shots for punching each other and things moving and whatnot. It's
like, I think it was done for a sense of scale.
Too hard to see.
Like the Transformers are so large, so you're shooting from the ground, like the perspective of a human character. So they're obviously just keep looking up at what's happening above them because these things are so large. But when you're watching a movie, that makes it very hard. You're in the thick of things. I get it. They want to put you in the action, but just from a viewer standpoint, it got really confusing to tell who was hitting who and what the hell's going on.
Yeah, and I mean, you can't really achieve it with humans as easily, but even at times when some movies try to do that, the same thing happens. Like, think if some movie tried to make a fluid looking fight between more monstrous humanoid creatures like giants or big ogres or something. Like, I never saw Warcraft, but from some of the like trailers or something, I could understand if there were times where they might have suffered the same kind of thing if they went that route. Is you have something that is supposed to be so big, you can't make the person feel like they are literally in the middle of the fight and still give a sense of being able to perceive everything. It just doesn't work.
And even still, there is one shot in the final fight where Charlie, Haley's character, is running like it's in front of her, just following her as she's running towards the frame, but the camera keeps pulling back. Mm-hmm. And Bumblebee and the other Transformer are fighting behind her, above her. Mm-hmm. You can clearly see all the shit that's happening. Like, that's a really well done shot, which I don't think that I can remember. Like, that some of that stuff ends up in Michael Bay movies.
Yeah, there was a refinement that definitely occurred. Like you said, maybe they had 5 movies worth of examples to learn from, or even if they certain people hadn't or would not have, that this group of people at least had the ideas that, like, hey, maybe this will work better. And I think I think it came off as an improvement.
I think one of the things when I was trying to research whether or not these movies were getting sequels or whatnot, there was apparently one of the producers has been producing all of them.
Okay.
I gotta find the name. Lorenzo di Bonaventura.
Okay.
So he's worked with all the Michael Bay movies and stuff. So he was quoted as saying something along the lines of, like, we need to find a sort of, like you said, a middle ground between what Bumblebee did and what the Transformers movie did. And I think he was quoted as saying, like, try to add a little bit more Bayhem in there because people were disappointed with the lack of action in Bumblebee. But I really think the
Okay.
way it kind of slows down, and like when those action sequences happen, I think it makes them cooler.
Right, and for the scale they were going for, like it would not have made sense if your focus is this one Autobot.
Yeah.
It would not have made sense to have so much action happening, because then you're either constantly, I guess, fighting the same antagonist, or you're piling antagonists on that person, or you want to pile antagonists on, but you realize it's not a balanced fight, so then you introduce more protagonists, which then takes away from the point of having a singular centered character like that.
Right. Yeah.
So by definition, it had to be, like a 2-on-1, like, it occurred. It wouldn't have made sense otherwise.
So having the single Transformer with Bumblebee, I guess, like, how did you feel about Bumblebee? Was he portrayed well enough? Did you feel for Bumblebee? Did they bring you some emotion for some of these Transformers?
It did a good job of finding a backstory for the character that I think in especially like the first Transformers or two with Shia, there was sort of like the cowering nature of Bumblebee.
Yeah. Okay.
Always to me felt like, okay, like you said, like the parallel is to like a child and their dog,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So, and I guess maybe this is an appropriate parallel then. The first ones always came off to me like, all right, Shia finds him in a junkyard or, crappy car lot, whatever. So maybe the parallel was that you're finding a dog at a shelter,
Right.
But he always came off as sort of like a sad sack, like the abused, previously abused and cowering dog.
Yeah.
But to me, there was never a point why. Like I had
Talking
no
about
reason
this one or
to-
the original one?
the originals.
Okay.
So I never had a reason to think, and like he definitely shrank back into that for a good portion of this movie. But I guess at least circumstantially here, they presented a reasonable explanation as to why that would be.
Yeah. The first time he shows up on Earth, he gets the shit kicked out of him.
Right. And not only that, like he's escaped, he's coming right out, literally fleeing a battle, shows up somewhere else, is pursued, has a huge fight, is debilitated.
Yeah.
So that made sense. They at least worked. They provided explanations that were not previously granted that seemed beyond satisfactory to me. It didn't, like I think there's a lot of, anytime you're doing prequels or you're doing a flashback episode, you're doing anything like that, there's ways to come up with a way to explain why a thing that you're now familiar with happened.
Yeah.
There are ways that check that box, and there are ways that check that box well. And this, I think, came off better. Might have potentially been able to be strengthened a little bit, but went beyond simply checking the box.
Yeah.
And I'll give them that. The one thing I was impressed with, I will say, I kept going back throughout the course of the movie and looking at the writer and director. And especially I kept honing in on the writer, wondering like, okay, if they were moving away from Michael Bay, they're going to a female teenager, mechanically car-inclined character. Who handled this? How, whose hands did they put something like that in? And so I went back to find this out, and this person is, what's her name? Christina Hodson. And this is only her third. No, she's credited as the sole screenwriter. This is only her third motion picture. She previously is I think the sole writer on a movie called Shut In, which was a like mediocre, middle of the road kind of thriller-ish movie with Naomi Watts and Charlie Heaton from Stranger Things.
Okay.
Charlie Heaton. And then she wrote a movie called Unforgettable with Katherine Heigl and Rosario Dawson. And that was the year afterward.
Heard of either of those?
So that was 2016 and 2017, and then her next job was this. 2018, she writes Bumblebee. Now, I think the real standout for me is her next project after Bumblebee was Birds of Prey.
Oh, I think I did know that actually.
So
That
I mean,
does sound
more than
familiar.
likely she got, she was hired for that job before this came out.
Right.
But I mean, I think that shows pretty good strength.
Yeah, yeah.
As of now, I mean, we joked about it before, but as of now, she is listed as a screenwriter for The Flash.
The movie Flash.
The movie The Flash.
Okay.
So I guess, Warner Brothers, DC maybe liked what she did with Birds of Prey, and maybe like, hey, you want to take a stab at The Flash? So she is, at the moment, listed as the screenwriter, although, as we've said, they've gone through so many writers and directors at this point, it doesn't really matter. But I would say that her resume so far, I've seen Shut In. I did not see Unforgettable, but between this and Birds of Prey so far, I'd say pretty strong.
Yeah, I think she's definitely someone to keep an eye on then, because I did like Birds of Prey too.
And I think that goes to a lot of the like before you even worry about your casting, before you worry about what your promos are going to look like, I think the choice of your background people, your directors, your producers, your writers especially, are really the people that make the difference.
I think even just bringing in a female writer on,
Yeah,
just as a good change of pace for whatever Michael Bay was doing the last couple of movies.
yeah, and I'd have to go back to look at those last chapters to see who the writers were on those and what else they had been doing, etc.
Yeah, I guess that's, truth be told, I don't actually know if they had a female writer on any of the earlier Transformers movies. I'm willing to bet they did not, but I could be wrong.
Fair. And even though either of us could look that up right now, I don't care enough.
Yeah, I'm sort of in the same boat.
But and then I wonder, was it that writer's idea to center it around, even though Haley is not anymore, the character is a teenage female. Is that the direction the studio wanted to go? Is that the idea that the director pitched?
Right.
I think whoever's initial idea that was probably a good choice. It's a good change of pace. Let's move some of this out of boy movie realm.
Right.
With machines and cars and guns and yay. And then to have a female writer handle writing a predominantly, main character who's supposed to be like a 17 or 18-year-old woman, young woman, then yeah, probably a good choice.
Yeah.
Probably made a big difference.
We'll sort of just spin it to like general stuff, but I know you touched about some of it a little bit, but general thoughts of what you liked or didn't like. Anything stood out to you that we haven't covered yet?
I wouldn't say there wasn't a whole lot that I didn't like. By the end especially, there really was no need, I don't think, to ever have the like catty Valley Girls parts in it. Like it really, to me, I don't know, it really didn't serve a purpose.
I guess just to give a little bit of that antagonistic, but it's a callback to I think it's set up just for the diving moment of her refusing to jump off the cliff. I think that's the only purpose they serve.
Well, you kind of get a glimpse of them earlier at the boardwalk, and then you encounter them again later. But even to me, the idea, like that whole scene of the diving, like the fact that she didn't want to go cliff diving again and do her, so like I think they explained well enough elsewhere that her life has been altered and broken by the death of her father, and these things of her childhood and her early teen years are past. I didn't like giving me a scene where she is given the opportunity to go high diving again and doesn't, regardless of the circumstances. I don't need that. You've given me enough elsewhere.
I almost feel like it's one of those things that like it's in there just so you don't forget about it. So it might not be essential, but if you're just kind of glossed over the home video portion of it, and forgot that she was a diver, midway through the movie you got to remind everybody again, so that when it shows up at the end in the climax, you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah. And maybe, I don't know. Yeah, I think they, for everything else that they created to get you to the moment to convey that, with like the guy that she spills the drinks on at the boardwalk, and the stupid plastics who give her shit because it's
Yeah.
the 80s and that's what they look like and that's what they sound like. Yeah, I don't think that was really needed per se. They could have rearranged the equation. But
Yeah, I get it.
other than that, I surprisingly I don't think I have a whole lot else that I would immediately call out as unnecessary or bloated, or well, that wasn't even fan service. That was this stupid thing they were trying. Like I what's coming to mind right now is akin to when we were watching Bad Boys 2, and Michael Bay spent like 15 minutes of the movie paying off some rat sex joke.
Yes.
And like there's none of that. There's nothing that like stood out to me in the movie that just seemed like they're like this literally did not need to be there at all, and it just seemed to be there for someone else's enjoyment as opposed to furthering the purpose of the story or the film or anything. There really wasn't much bloated to this, I would say, except those little pieces that I called out with the Valley Girls.
Yeah, and it like the Michael Bayness that sticks out of like the second movie for me is when they're at the pyramids, and then there's the Transformer climbing the pyramid, and there's two wrecking balls where his balls are, and then they make a testicle joke or something like that. Like that, why do you need that in a Transformers movie? Why do you need that in any movie really? But I feel like that's Michael Bay and his Bayness.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
I'm wondering. I'm starting to think too. Like I feel like the more you're talking about it, the more I'm. And you can correct me even if I'm wrong, but I'm thinking like after we're done doing this, I feel like this is, and maybe it's just because I felt like it was sort of like this for me, but it's one of those movies that the more I think about it, and even the more I watch it, I think the more I like it.
Okay.
So I think even the more we're talking, I feel like you might like it more than you think, and I'm just thinking if you like simmer on it for a while, you might come back and be like, you know what? I did like that a lot more than I think I did.
I would say I probably do. I mean, I am probably subconsciously being hesitant about glowing about it because of, past feelings of the franchise.
We will put you on the spot for every future Transformers movie of like, what did Josh think about this one?
Okay. Well, again, it depends if it's going to continue from the creators of the original series, and then a real big part of the Transformers movies, especially too, is like beyond the type of story that they told in the first one and now in Bumblebee. I don't know if I care.
Okay, fair.
I don't know if I care about the Transformers and their trials and tribulations and the goals of the bad guys and what the good guys are trying to protect and what they see as their duties and what they stand for, and then even the human people who get involved along the way. That's probably been the biggest barrier, aside from the people who have been making them, is just I don't know if I care about the Transformers.
Well, that's why I sort of was asking why you thought about Bumblebee, because I feel like this is one of the first movies that really, out of the franchise, makes you sort of care and give a crap about any of the Transformers.
Yeah, granted, and I think even a sequel to this, depending if they went for a straight sequel to this, depending on what the nature of the conflict is and really what the center of things going on are, I would be inclined to give a sequel to this a shot if not necessarily some of the same people are involved in making it, but if the absence of other people is there.
I mean, I'm actually surprised that they're not jumping at a sequel for this movie. I think it was very well critically received. I think it was successful at the box office for a lower budget than what the last at least 2 or 3 Transformers movies have done.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, I feel like that's all the blueprints to be just greenlight a sequel. And yet they haven't done that. So I don't know what they're hesitating for.
Yeah, not sure.
So I was just trying to look at
to give it a chance, but I would be I think it would be a heavy lift. They would have a big challenge for me at the end of that next movie to say, yeah, I really gave a crap what happened.
Yeah.
Like I have no investment point. I just don't really care about them.
Yeah.
So, but if they find, a compelling way to do it, like they did a better job with this one, then sure, I'd be willing to give it a shot.
So I was even just trying to look at budgets and stuff to see what the Transformers movies have done, at least the last couple. I didn't go all the way through, but so like we'll go with the last two with Wahlberg and then Bumblebee. So Age of Extinction, which was the number 4, first one with Wahlberg. Budget $210 million. Worldwide, it ended up at $1.1 billion.
Shit, seriously?
Yeah.
I knew 2 or 3 made a buttload. I did not know that 4 still did.
So 5 was a budget of $217 million. Worldwide ended at $605 million.
Oof.
So that took a hit and did not perform. Opening domestic was $44 million. So that did not have a very good opening weekend compared to $100 million for number 4 opening weekend.
Number 5 was the Knights one, right?
Yes.
The one with like Anthony Hopkins.
Yeah, I think he showed up in that one. So Bumblebee had a budget of $135 million. So they cut like $100 million almost out of the budget. Give or take 80 million. We'll say 80 million. Mm-hmm. Opening weekend was $21 million. So it already made half of what the last Transformers movie did with $80 million less in the budget.
Sure. Ended
up worldwide at $467 million, which I think is still pretty respectable considering the budget and where they were coming off of. Like, it seems like the Transformers movies are on the decline. And for the last, big budget Transformers movie to make $605 million and then Bumblebee to make $467, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Like I said, I'm still surprised they haven't just said, yes, make us another one. Fit it. Like, who at this point, who cares about the continuity? Like, I feel like you could successfully reboot Transformers with Bumblebee. Just use this as your jumping off point and just start a new path.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see that.
So, I don't know. That's just sort of my 2 cents of where this franchise should go or what they should be doing. But
I mean, based on what you've told me about the story continuity through 5 chapters, I mean, it sounds like they're in X-Men territory by this point. So, yeah, you're right. If they sort of established something that works, sure, use this as a jumping off point, just carry on through here.
I feel like they want you to just be distracted by, like, look, big Transformer monsters fighting each other. Yay! That's the gist of those movies. Yeah, I could not tell you 2 shits about what the stories were for any of those movies.
No, and like I said, so much that I forgot even about the first one. I kid you not, I do not remember a single thing about the third movie. The only things that even remotely stuck with me was that like Shia was like older, so he's in the like he's an adult, so he's like out of college, he has a job,
right? He
has a new girlfriend and something, and then I just remember like the one visual shot of like the snake-like robot like eating the building and it falling down.
Yeah, that was sort of like their like Battle of New York, like from Avengers, like the big spectacle event where the city falls with all this shit that's going down.
Yeah, other than that, I don't even remember what the movie's about.
Yeah,
at all. Same thing with number 2. Like I said, all I remember is his mom running around campus high, like trying to play frisbee or whatever the hell she was doing.
I guarantee you that was studio notes of like, hey, the parents were funny in the first one. Let's like ramp that up to 11 for the next one.
Yeah. So I would guess that in a couple years, I would still remember some basic details about this movie.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's a plus. Yeah, I don't know if I have anything else that I need to question you on. So I don't know if there's anything else you want to touch on or bring to the table.
Not necessarily. I think we got most of it out. Whatever they did, my opinion is that it was an improvement, and if I can figure out a way to keep doing that in some regard, then they might not get my money at the movie theater, but there's a chance, I don't know, maybe I'll like Redbox it or something.
I mean, I will probably still be the guinea pig. I will see these in the theater. I will let you know if they're worth taking the time to go see. I mean, hopefully, by the time any of these hit the theater again, at least, the A-list stuff for AMC will be working again. So technically, you can just see it as part of your subscription if you want to.
That is true. That is true. And unless, I guess the only gamble at that point would be, because these are typically like summer spectacle movies.
Right.
So is there enough other stuff out that we literally don't want to quasi see it for free.
Yeah, we'll have to hold our breath and see what happens for the next. Like I said, I'm waiting to see what they announce, if we get any confirmation of where this franchise is going after this movie, whether they are continuing this one, going back to the old timeline, doing something in between. Who the fuck knows? But until we get some concrete confirmation, we're just kind of waiting and seeing right now.
Yeah.
But all right, well, hey, at least my fear is that like we watch some of these movies that people haven't seen and they just come out of it like, this was fucking, I just wasted 3 hours of my life. What the fuck? You're like, so I'm glad that at least the last couple, even the Fast and Furious movies, you're not just outright hating them. So
I said that I will try to. Well, part of it is I will try to find something positive if I can.
Well, that's good.
If I don't, I mean, if I just flat out don't like things, I'm not shy about saying so. I don't look for things to be shitty about just to find something to be shitty about.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I also know, like, we're doing it to hang out. We're doing it for the show. We're doing it to have, give people, be provocative or be thought-provoking or just conversational, etc. So I can't imagine, like, I could come out not liking something, but I would never, especially for these purposes, never say, like, I'm never doing this again, and I probably am, like, I'm going to unfriend you now.
Hey, at the very least, these are like audio diaries for what we watched and when.
Exactly.
So hopefully someone else enjoys it as much as we like doing it. But, all right, so that's it for us. We'll probably come back with another Never Seen That at some point, especially if Josh keeps getting bored. I'm sure he'll hit me up with another movie we should be watching.
Surely.
Yeah, I got to work on my list, too. We talked about that, I think, before the show started, how it seems like Josh has just been on the hot seat for the majority of these, so we gotta try to figure out either other people to bring in or other movies for me that I need to watch and try to flip the script here. But in the meantime, if you've enjoyed the show, you can leave us a 5-star rating and review. Be sure to give us a share on social media. You can follow us on Spotify, iTunes, Google, Anchor, Stitcher. Hopefully anywhere you search for Bry Guy and Super Friends, you will be able to find us. We should be available. You can find us on Facebook, search Bry Guy and Super Friends, or go to facebook.com/Bry Guy Super Friends. You can hit us up there, leave us some questions, comments, topic suggestions, anything you want to hear that you like to hear, want to hear more of, all that stuff. We're open to suggestions. You can try to email us, bryguysuperfriends@gmail.com. It's there for show. I won't check it. Just do what you got to do. Hit us up on Twitter @BGSuperFriends. That is a little bit more accessible. I will see that. And on behalf of Josh and myself, thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.